Warlike Menelaus, son of Atreus, did not fail to notice that Patroclus had been overcome in battle by the Trojans. He advanced through the front ranks, bronze armour glittering, and stood over Patroclus' body as a mother cow stands protectively over the first calf she has brought into the world. So auburn-haired Menelaus stood over Patroclus and guarded the body with his spear and round shield, determined to kill anyone who advanced against him. But Panthous' son, Euphorbus, of the ash spear, had not lost interest in the body of matchless Patroclus. Coming close up to it, he said to Menelaus, "Olympian-born Menelaus, son of Atreus, leader of men, get back, leave the dead man, and don't touch his blood-stained armour. I was the first of the Trojans and their famous allies to hit Patroclus with a spear in the heat of battle, so allow me to win heroic glory in Trojan eyes, or I will hit you and take your precious life." Furious, auburn-haired Menelaus said, "Father Zeus, it is no good thing to boast so arrogantly. The courage of the panther, the lion, and the murderous wild boar, the most high-spirited and defiant beast of all, is, it seems, nothing to compare with the pride of these sons of Panthous, with their famous ash spears. Yet your brother, mighty Hyperenor, did not long survive to enjoy the delights of youth when he insulted and stood up to me in battle. He said I was the most contemptible of the Greek men-at-arms, but I seem to remember that it was not on his own feet that he went home to delight his loving wife and cherished parents. And I'll cut you down to size as I did him if you take me on. Get back now, join the rabble, and don't stand up to me, or you will come to grief. Only a fool is wise after the event." So he spoke, but did not persuade him. Euphorbus replied and said, "This very day, Olympian-born Menelaus, you are going to pay the price for my brother, whom you killed and boast about, and whose wife you left a widow in her new bridal chamber. You caused his parents untold tears and misery, yet I could still wipe away the tears of that unhappy pair if I brought back your head and armour and put them in the hands of Panthous and his wife, godlike Phrontis. But our business will not long remain unsettled or uncontested, victory or defeat." With these words he stabbed Menelaus' round shield, but the spear did not break through, and the tip was bent back by the stout shield. Then Menelaus, son of Atreus, attacked with his spear and a prayer to Father Zeus. As Euphorbus drew back, Menelaus stabbed him in the base of the throat, and threw the whole weight of his body into it, keeping a firm grip on the spear. The point went clean through his soft neck. He thudded to the ground, and his armour clattered about him. His hair, lovely as the Graces, and curls he used to bind with gold and silver spirals, were all drenched with blood, like the shoot of an olive tree that a gardener nurtures in a place of its own, where there is enough water for it to drink and grow fine and healthy. The breezes of all the winds shake it, and it bursts into white blossom, but suddenly there is a great gust of wind which uproots it from its trench and lays it flat on the ground. Such was Panthous' son Euphorbus of the ash spear, when Menelaus killed him and stripped him of his armour. As a mountain lion, which has confidence in its own strength, pounces on the finest heifer in a grazing herd, it seizes her, breaks her neck with its powerful jaws, and then tearing at her, devours her blood and entrails. All round it the dogs and herdsmen create a terrific din, but keep their distance. They have no desire to close in, and are green with fear of it. So not a single Trojan had the daring to come near illustrious Menelaus. Then Menelaus would have found it easy to take Euphorbus' splendid armour if Phoebus Apollo had not grudged him it and sent Hector, equal of Ares, to attack him. Apollo went to Hector in the disguise of a man called Mentis, a leader of the Cicones, and spoke winged words. "Hector, at the moment you are running around in pursuit of the unattainable, the horses of warlike Achilles, which are hard to master and difficult to drive, at any rate for a mere man, or anyone but Achilles, whose mother is a goddess. Meanwhile, warlike Menelaus is standing over Patroclus' body and has killed the best man in Troy. Euphorbus, son of Panthous, will never fight again." With these words the god went back into the heart of the battle, and Hector's heart was wrung with grief. But presently he peered across the ranks and saw the pair of them, Menelaus removing the impressive arms, and Euphorbus lying on the ground, the blood pouring from the stab wound. Yelling shrilly, Hector advanced through the front ranks, his bronze armour glittering, looking like the inextinguishable flames in the furnace of the blacksmith god Hephaestus. Menelaus did not fail to recognize his war cry. Disturbed, he reflected on the situation. "What shall I do? If I abandon these fine arms and the body of Patroclus, who fell here fighting to avenge wrongs done to me, any Greek who sees me will rightly be angry. But if, to save face, I fight with Hector and the Trojans single-handed, I am likely to be cut off and surrounded, since Hector of the flashing helmet is bringing all his Trojans with him. But why talk to myself like this, when a man decides, without the good will of the gods, to fight another who enjoys their favour? He has disaster coming to him. Surely then, no Greek is going to be angry to see me giving way to Hector, who is fighting with the gods on his side. If only I knew where Ajax, master of the battle cry, was, the pair of us could call up our old will to fight, even with the god against us, and go to see if we could save the body for Achilles, son of Peleus. That would make the best of a bad situation." While these thoughts raced through his mind, the Trojan ranks bore down on him with Hector at their head. Abandoning Patroclus' body, Menelaus turned and retreated, but with many a backward look, like a bearded lion being chased from the fold with spears and shouts by the shepherds and their dogs. He feels the chill of fear in his brave heart, and much against his will abandons the farmyard. So Menelaus withdrew from Patroclus' body. But he turned and stood his ground when he reached his own contingent, looking everywhere for great Ajax, son of Telamon. He saw him presently, out on the left flank, exhorting and urging on his men to fight, since Phoebus Apollo had filled them with an unnatural panic. Menelaus ran up to him at once and said, "Ajax, over here, old friend. Patroclus is dead. Hurry, we might at least save the body for Achilles. It's been stripped. Hector of the flashing helmet has taken his armour." So he spoke, and his words went straight to warlike Ajax's heart. He and auburn-haired Menelaus set off through the front lines. Hector was beginning to haul the body away. He had removed Patroclus' famous armour, and now he wanted to behead him with his sharp sword, drag off the trunk, and leave it to the dogs of Troy. Cruel. But when Ajax came up with his tower-like shield, Hector retreated into his own contingent and leapt onto his chariot. He gave the beautiful armour to some Trojans to take back to Ilium, where it would make his reputation. Meanwhile, Ajax covered Patroclus with his broad shield and stood at bay like a lioness over its cubs. Leading them through the forest, it is confronted by huntsmen, breathing defiance. It knits its eyebrows together in a frown that covers its eyes, so Ajax planted himself by Patroclus. Warlike Menelaus, son of Atreus, took his stand back to back with him, anguish growing in his heart. Glaucus, son of Hippolochus, leader of the Lycian forces, looked blackly at Hector and reproached him sharply. Hector, with your wonderful looks, you are useless in battle. Your heroic reputation hides a coward after all. Ask yourself how you are going to save the town and its people with nobody to help you but the native Trojans, since none of the Lycians will be going out to fight against the Greeks for Ilium. All along they have been given no reward for battling relentlessly with the enemy day in, day out. What hopes has a lesser man of being rescued by you in a tight corner when you have callously left Sarpedon, your guest and comrade in arms, like carrion in Greek hands? You and your people owed much to him while he was alive, yet you cannot bring yourself to save him from the dogs. So now, if I have any influence with the Lycians, we go home. And that will mean the end for Troy. Why, if the Trojans had any real courage, the fearless spirit that enters into men who are fighting their enemies tooth and nail in defense of their country, we should soon drag Patroclus into Ilium. And if that man's dead body could be brought out of the battle and into Priam's great town, the Greeks would at once return Sarpedon's beautiful armour, and we could bring Sarpedon's body back into Ilium. Such is the man to whom Patroclus was attendant, the best warrior in the Greek camp, with the best men at close combat under his command. But you could not bring yourself, with the enemy war cry ringing in your ears, to face great-hearted Ajax, to look him in the eye and fight it out with him, because he is the better man. Looking blackly at him, Hector of the flashing helmet replied, Glaucus, what's made a man like you talk so insolently? I cannot believe it. I always took you for the wisest man in the whole of fertile Lycia. As it is, you have destroyed my faith in your judgment by talking like this and suggesting I dared not stand up to awe-inspiring Ajax. Believe me, fighting and the noise of chariots do not frighten me, but the will of Zeus, who drives the storm cloud, always prevails. He can easily make a brave man run away and lose a battle. But at another time, that very same God will urge him to fight on. But come here, my friend, and stand by my side, and see what I can do. See whether you are right, and I shall prove a coward all day long, or whether I can stop some of these Greeks, determined as they are, from fighting any longer over Patroclus's body. With these words, he called out to the Trojans in a loud voice, Trojans, Lycians, and you Dardanians that like your fighting hand to hand, be men, my comrades, and call up that fighting spirit of yours. I am going to put on the armour of matchless Achilles, the fine armour I took from mighty Patroclus when I killed him. With these words, Hector of the flashing helmet left the battlefield and ran after his men who were carrying the famous armour of Achilles, son of Peleus, to the town. He soon caught them up, since they had not gone far, and he ran fast. Then he changed his equipment, standing far from the battlefield with all its tiers, telling his war-loving Trojans to take his own arms to sacred Ilium, and putting on the imperishable armour of Achilles, which the sky gods had given to his father Peleus. Peleus, when he grew old, had passed it on to his son, but the son did not grow old in his father's armour. When from afar Zeus, who marshals the clouds, saw Hector equipping himself in the arms of godlike Achilles, he shook his head and said to himself, Unhappy man, little knowing how close you are to death, you are putting on the imperishable armour of a mighty man of war, before whom all others tremble. And it was you that killed his comrade, brave and gentle Patroclus, gentle my ass, and improperly stripped the armour from his head and shoulders. Well, for the moment, at any rate, I grant you supremacy. But you must pay for it. There will be no homecoming for you from battle, and your wife Andromache will never take the famous armour of Achilles from your hands." The son of Cronus spoke, and nodded his sable brows in confirmation. The armour fitted Hector's body well. The savage spirit of the terrible war god now entered him, and power and fresh vigour filled his limbs. Uttering his piercing war cry, he went in search of his renowned allies and presented himself before all of them, resplendent in the armour of great-hearted Achilles. To rouse their spirits, he went up and spoke to each of them in turn. To Mesthalus and Glaucus, to Medon and Thessalocus, to Asteropaeus, Decenor and Hippothos, to Phorcys and Chromis and Enomus the prophet. Urging them on, he spoke winged words. "Hear me, you countless tribes of allies that live round about. I neither sought nor needed mere numbers when I summoned each of you here from your own towns. What I wanted was men who would be fully committed to fighting the war-loving Greeks in defense of the women and little children of Troy. That is why I impoverish my own people by demanding they supply you with gifts and provisions so you keep your courage high. Turn, then, and straight at the enemy, every one of you, to live or die. That is the intimacy of battle. To the man who forces Ajax back and brings Patroclus, dead though he is, into the Trojan lines, I will give half the spoils, keeping the other half myself, so that he will share the glory equally with me." So he spoke, and they lifted their spears and charged at the Greeks with full force, filled with high hopes of retrieving the body from Ajax, son of Telamon. The innocents, Ajax was going to take many a life over Patroclus' body. Then Ajax spoke to Menelaus, master of the battle cry. "My old friend, Olympian-born Menelaus, I'm beginning to think we'll never get safely back from this fight. I am not only very afraid Patroclus' body will soon be glutting the Trojan dogs and birds, but also of the perilous situation we'll be facing, with a cloud of war called Hector swirling up on all sides. Death is staring us in the face. Quick, quick, call the Greek chieftains, somebody might hear." So he spoke, and Menelaus, master of the battle cry, complied and sent his voice ringing out to the whole Greek army. "Friends, rulers, and leaders of the Greeks, all of you who drink your wine at the public cost by the side of Agamemnon and Menelaus, who share in the command and derive your honour and glory from Zeus. It is impossible for me to pick out every commander. The battle's flaring up everywhere. Hear every one of you without being named. Think of the disgrace that the dogs of Ilium should have Patroclus to toy with." So he spoke, and swift Ajax, son of Oileus, heard every word of this and was the first to come running up to Menelaus through the mayhem. He was followed by Idomeneus, and Idomeneus' attendant, Meriones, equal of the murderous war god Ares. As for the rest that came behind to reinforce the Greek line, where is the man who could remember all their names? The Trojans advanced in a mass, and Hector led them, as a great wave roars against the current flowing out of the mouth of a sky-fed river, and the seashores headlands on either side boom thunderously as the sea washes back. With such a roar did the Trojans advance, but united in their resolution, the Greeks faced them, making a fence of their bronze shields around Patroclus. Moreover, Zeus, son of Cronus, spread a thick mist about their gleaming helmets. He had no quarrel with Patroclus while he was alive and serving as Achilles' tendant, and loathed the thought of his becoming carrion for the enemy dogs of Troy. So now he roused Patroclus' comrades in arms to fight in his defence. At first, the Trojans flung back the dark-eyed Greeks, who abandoned the body and gave ground before them. Even so, the proud Trojans did not succeed in killing any of them with their spears for all their efforts. But the Trojans did start dragging off the body. The Greeks, however, were not going to be separated from it for long. They were soon rallied by Ajax, who, next to matchless Achilles, was the best-looking and best fighter of all the Greeks. He charged through the front line, fierce as a wild boar in the mountains, who easily scatters the hounds and lively young huntsman as it turns at bay in the glades. So glorious Ajax charged and easily scattered the ranks of Trojans who had gathered round Patroclus and made up their minds that they were going to win the glory and drag his body into the city. Hippothous, glorious son of Pelasgian Lethus, had tied his sword belt round the tendons of Patroclus's ankle and was hauling him by the foot through the thick of the action. He hoped to do Hector and the Trojans a favour. But he did himself a bad one, since he soon ran into trouble from which no one, however willing, could save him. Ajax rushed up to him through the crowd, and from close range struck him through his bronze-cheeked helmet. The plumed helmet, hit by the great spear and mighty hand behind it, was split apart by the spear point, and the man's blood and his brains came gushing out along the spear socket. Hippothous collapsed. Well, he's got no brain. He let the foot of great-hearted Patroclus drop from his hand to the ground, and fell there next to it, face forward on the body. He was a long way from fertile Larissa, and could never repay his parents for their care. His life had been too short when Ajax's spear cut him off. Now Hector hurled a glittering spear at Ajax, but Ajax was on the lookout, and just avoided the bronze spear, which hit a man called Schedius, best of the Phocians, who ruled over many, and whose home was in the impressive town of Panopeus. Hector struck him under the middle of the collarbone. The bronze spear point went right through and emerged below his shoulder. He thudded to the ground, and his armour clattered about him. In his turn, Ajax stabbed warlike Phorcys full in the belly as he stood over Hippothous, and smashed a plate of his body armour. The spear point let out his innards, and, falling in the dust, he clutched at the ground. The Trojan front and glorious Hector himself fell back, while the Greeks, with a triumphant cry, dragged away the bodies of Phorcys and Hippothous, and removed the armour from their shoulders. Weakened and demoralised, the Trojans would have been driven back into Ilium by the war-loving Greeks, who would thus, by their sheer brute force, have won a victory in defiance of the will of Zeus, if Apollo had not roused Aeneas. The god took the form of a herald, Periphas, who was kindly disposed to Aeneas, having grown old as a herald in the service of Aeneas's old father, Anchises. In this disguise, Apollo, son of Zeus, spoke to him. "Aeneas, if the gods were indeed against you, how could you hope to save lofty Ilium? I have known men who saved their country, even though their own people were inferior, by relying on their own brute force, their bravery and their numbers. But Zeus is on our side. He wants us to beat the Greeks, and yet you were scared out of your senses and refused to fight." So he spoke, and Aeneas looked him in the face and knew him for the archer god Apollo. He gave Hector a great shout. "Hector and all you Trojan and allied commanders, it's a shameful thing to let the war-loving Greeks drive us, weakened and demoralised, back into Ilium. Besides, one of the gods came up to me just now and told me that Zeus, the High Counselor, is still our ally in this war. So let's make straight at the Greeks and make sure they don't find it too easy to take the dead Patroclus back to their ships." So Aeneas spoke and leapt forward to make a stand well in front of the foremost fighters. As a result, the Trojans turned about and faced the Greeks. Then Aeneas stabbed Leocritus. This man was a brave follower of Lycomedes, and his death filled war-loving Lycomedes with pity. He ran up, stood beside him, and let fly with his glittering spear, which hit Apisaon. Oh my God. Which hit Apisaon, shepherd of the people, in the liver under the midriff, bringing him down at once. Apisaon was one of those that had come from fertile Paeonia. In fact, he was their best warrior next to Asteropaeus. His death filled warlike Asteropaeus with pity, and he now charged with a will. No, fuck me. His death filled warlike Asteropaeus with pity, and he now charged with a will at the Greeks himself, but it was too late to accomplish any good. They had surrounded Patroclus with a fence of shields and levelled spears. Awe-inspiring Ajax in particular was going round issuing strict orders to them all. No one was to back off from the body, and no one was to break away and fight out in front. They were all to stick close to Patroclus and fight hand to hand. Such were awe-inspiring Ajax's orders, and the earth was soaked with crimson blood, and men fell in heaps, the Trojans and their proud allies mingling their corpses with the Greek dead. For the Greeks did not fight a bloodless battle either, and yet they lost far fewer men. All the time they remembered to protect each other from death in the mayhem. So they fought on like fire, and you would not have thought the sun and moon were still functioning, since a mist had spread over that part of the battlefield where the pick of men were disputing the body of Patroclus. Elsewhere, however, the Trojan and the Greek men-at-arms were battling without that problem under a clear sky. There was brilliant sunshine everywhere, and not a cloud in sight above the plain or on the hills. The fighting was desultory. They kept their distance and avoided trouble from each other's spears. It was only in the centre that the best of the Greeks were suffering badly from the mist and the battle in which they were being ground down by the brutal spears. Two men, illustrious Thrasymedes and Antilochus, had not yet heard that matchless Patroclus had been killed. They thought he was still alive and fighting Trojans in the front line of battle. They were fighting some way away, looking out for casualties and signs of panic in their own contingent, as Nestor had told them to do when he urged them back from the black ships into battle. But the great grim struggle continued unabated all day long. All the while knees, shins, feet, hands, and eyes streamed with the sweat of the exertions of those who were battling it out over the brave attendant of swift-footed Achilles. As a man gives his people a great bull's hide soaked in fat for stretching, they take the hide, stand round in a ring and stretch it, and the moisture soon comes out while the fat sinks in, and with many hands tugging at it, it is stretched tight in every part, so both sides tugged the body to and fro between them in that restricted space. Each party had high hopes, the Trojans of dragging Patroclus into Ilium, and the Greeks of bringing him back to the hollow ships. They ground savagely away at each other over the body. Not even Ares, who drives on armies, or Athene at her angriest, would have been displeased by the sight. Such was the agonizing struggle Zeus extended that day over man and horse alike in the battle for Patroclus. Godlike Achilles had as yet no inkling of Patroclus's death. They were fighting a long way from the swift ships under the walls of Ilium, and it never entered his head that Patroclus had been killed. He thought of him as pressing on to the very gates of the town, but then returning safe and sound. He certainly never expected him to sack the town without him, or with him either. He had often been told this was not to be by his own mother, who used to give him private information about Almighty Zeus's plans. Not that she told him now of the disaster that had occurred, the death of his dearest companion. Over the dead man, meanwhile, the others, with their pointed spears, were locked in an unending struggle and killing one another. The bronze-armoured Greeks said to a man, "Comrades, there is no honour in falling back to our hollow ships if we let the horse-taming Trojans drag this body into their town and win glory. The best thing to happen would be for the black earth to swallow us here where we stand." And on their side, the great-hearted Trojans said, "Comrades, even if all of us are destined to be killed beside this body, no one must retreat." So they spoke, and gave each other fresh heart. So the fight continued, and an iron din rose up through the murmuring air and struck the bronze sky. Far from the conflict, the horses of Achilles had been weeping ever since they learned that their charioteer had been brought down in the dust by man-slaying Hector. Automedon, Dioreus' son, did all he could with them. He tried lashing them with his whistling whip, he tried coaxing them, he tried threats, but the pair refused either to go back to the ships and the broad Hellespont, or into the battle with the Greeks. Firm as a gravestone planted on the barrow of a dead man or woman, they stood motionless in front of their beautiful chariot, their heads bowed to the earth. Zeus, son of Cronus, took pity on the pair when he saw their grief. He shook his head and said to himself, "Poor beasts! Why did we give you, who are ageless and immortal, to Lord Peleus, who is doomed to die? Did we mean you to share the sorrows of unhappy men? For of all creatures that breathe and creep about on the earth, there is none so miserable as man. But Hector shall not drive you and your ornate chariot. That I will not have. Is it not enough that he has the armour and exults as he does? No, I will fill your legs with energy and your hearts with courage, so that you can at least save Automedon and bring him back from the battle to the hollow ships. For I still intend to give glory to the Trojans, to go on killing Greeks till they reach the well-benched ships. The sun sets, and the blessed darkness intervenes." With these words, Zeus breathed energy into the horses. They shook the dust from their manes and galloped off with their fast chariot to join the Trojans and Greeks. Behind them, Automedon took on the fighter's role, though he grieved bitterly for his companion, and charged into battle with his chariot like a vulture after geese. His horse's speed made it easy for him to avoid becoming entangled in the melee of Trojans, and as easy to dash into it and pursue an enemy through the crowd. But he could not kill the men he chased. Alone as he was in the speeding chariot, he found it impossible to control his swift horses and at the same time bring his spear into play. At last, however, his companion Alcimedon saw him. He came up behind the chariot and said to Automedon, "Automedon, what god has robbed you of your intelligence and put this pointless idea in your head? Look at the way you're taking on the front-line Trojans single-handed when your companion has been killed, and Hector himself is swaggering about in the armour of Achilles." Automedon, son of Dioreus, said, "Alcimedon, was there anyone like you for mastering and controlling the strength of these immortal horses, except Patroclus, wise as the gods while he lived? But now death and destiny have claimed him, so take the whip and shining reins yourself while I get down and fight." So Automedon spoke and dismounted, while Alcimedon leapt into the fast war chariot and quickly seized the whip and the reins. Glorious Hector saw them and said to Aeneas, who happened to be near, "Aeneas, adviser of the bronze-armoured Trojan, I see the horses of swift-footed Achilles coming into battle with an incompetent pair of charioteers. I think we could capture them, if, that is, you'd care to help me. Those two would never stand and fight if you and I attacked them." So he spoke, and Aeneas, strong son of Anchises, complied. So the two men went forward, protecting their shoulders with their shields of dried and toughened ox hide, onto which much bronze had been hammered. Chromis and godlike Oratus both went with them, and they had great hopes of killing the men and driving off their high-necked horses. The innocents! They were not about to disengage from Automedon without bloodshed. Meanwhile Automedon prayed to Father Zeus and was filled with power and fresh vigour. At once he spoke to Alcimedon, his trusted friend. "Alcimedon, keep near me with the horses. Let me feel their breath on my back. If Hector isn't killed in the front line himself, I don't think there'll be any holding him in his determination till he has killed both of us, jumped up behind Achilles' beautiful horses, and put the Greek ranks to flight." With these words, he called to the Ajaxes and Menelaus. "You two Ajaxes, commanders of the Greeks, and you, Menelaus, entrust your best men to stand over the body there and hold the enemy off, while you come to help us keep death at bay. We're still alive here in the battle with all its tears, but Hector and Aeneas, best of the Trojans, are bearing down on us at speed. But since everything that happens is in the lap of the gods, I'll try a throw myself and leave the rest to Zeus." He spoke, balanced his long-shadowed spear, and hurled it. It hit Aretus's round shield. This failed to stop it, and the spear pierced it and drove on through his belt into his abdomen. As a strong man with a sharp axe strikes at a farmyard ox behind the horns and then cuts its throat, and the ox springs forward and then collapses, so Aretus sprang forward and then fell on his back. The sharp spear quivered in his gut and drew the life from him. Hector then threw a glittering spear at Automedon, but he was on the lookout and avoided the bronze weapon. He ducked under it, and the long shaft stuck in the ground behind him, its butt end quivering till the imperious war god Ares took away its force. And now they would have been at one another's throats with their swords, if the two Ajaxes, who had come up through the press in answer to their comrade's call, had not caused their determined opponents to disengage. Frightened of such a pair, Hector, Aeneas, and godlike Chromius drew back, leaving the stricken Aretus to lie where he fell. Automedon, equal of swift Ares, stripped him of his arms, and spoke in triumph over him. "That consoles me somewhat for Patroclus's death, though he was a better man than the one I've killed." With these words, he lifted the blood-stained armour into his chariot and mounted it himself, his feet and hands covered in blood like a lion that has eaten a bull. Once more, conflict with all its tears and pain raged fiercely around Patroclus, since Athene brought it on. She came down from Olympus to give a lead to the Greeks on the instructions of far-thundering Zeus, who had changed his mind again. Like a shimmering rainbow that Zeus stretches across the skies to warn mankind of war, or the coming of a chilly storm that stops work in the fields and discomforts the flocks. So Athene, wrapping herself in a shimmering mist, plunged in among the Greek troops and stirred up one and all. First she urged on mighty Menelaus, who happened to be nearest. Borrowing the shape and tireless voice of Phoenix, she said, "It's you, Menelaus, who will hang your head in shame at the reproach if the swift dogs are allowed to maul the loyal friend of noble Achilles under the walls of Ilium. Hold firm then, with all your strength, and throw every man we have into the fight." Menelaus, master of the battle cry, replied, "Phoenix, my venerable lord and ancient friend, I only wish Athene would give me strength and keep the missiles off. Then I should gladly make a stand and fight for Patroclus, whose death has struck me a cruel blow. But Hector has the terrifying energy of fire. He's on an unstoppable rampage with his spear. Zeus is handing him the glory." So he spoke, and grey-eyed Athene was delighted that Menelaus had prayed to her before all other gods. She strengthened his shoulders and knees and implanted in his chest the daring of a fly which is so fond of human blood that it returns to its attack, however often a man brushes it away. With such daring did the goddess fill his heart, and he took his stand beside Patroclus's body and threw his glittering spear. There was a Trojan called Podes. He was a man of wealth and breeding, and Hector held him dearer than any other Trojan, since they were the best of companions at feasts. This man was struck on the belt by auburn-haired Menelaus' spear as he started to run away. The spear went right through him. He thudded to the ground, and Menelaus, son of Atreus, dragged Patroclus' body away from the Trojans and gave it to his men. But now Apollo stood by Hector and urged him on. The god went up to him disguised as Phenops, who came from Abydos and was Hector's favourite among his foreign guests. In this disguise the archer god Apollo said, "Hector, what Greek will ever fear you again if you let yourself be scared by Menelaus, who has been a soft touch so far? But now he has come and lifted out the dead man on his own and killed your loyal friend Podes, a brave man in the front line." So he spoke, and a black cloud of grief descended on Hector. He advanced through the front ranks, bronze armour glittering. And at this moment Zeus, who had hidden Mount Ida under clouds, discharged a lightning flash with a great clap of thunder, and taking up his gleaming fringe aegis, shook it out, gave victory to the Trojans, and filled the Greeks with panic, because he'd changed his mind again. Menelaus from Boeotia was the first of them to turn and run. He had been steadily facing the enemy with a spear from Polydamas, who had come up and thrown from short range, hit him on the top of the shoulder. It was a glancing blow, but the spear point grazed the bone. Then Hector at close quarters stabbed Leitus in the wrist and ended his interest in the fight. Leitus, knowing he could no longer expect to handle a spear and take on the enemy, gave one look round and fled. As Hector went in pursuit of Leitus, Idomeneus, son of Deucalion, threw at Hector and hit his body armour by the nipple on his chest. Very specific. But the long spear broke at the socket, and the Trojan gave a yell. Hector retaliated with a spear at Idomeneus, who by now had mounted a chariot. He just missed him, but hit Coeranus, who had come to the war from well-built Lyctus in Crete as attendant and charioteer of Meriones. Coeranus had galloped to the rescue of Idomeneus, who had set out from the ships that day on foot and would otherwise have presented the enemy with a great triumph. So Coeranus was the salvation of Idomeneus and preserved his life, but he lost his own to man-slaying Hector, whose spear and its socket, hitting him under the jaw and ear, knocked out all his teeth and cut his tongue in half. Coeranus crashed out of the chariot, dropping the reins on the ground. Meriones stooped down, picked them up from the ground with his own hands, and said to Idomeneus, "Now whip the horses on till you reach the ships. You don't need me to tell you we have lost the day." So he spoke, and Idomeneus lashed the lovely maned horses back to the hollow ships. He was a frightened man. Menelaus and great-hearted Ajax were also well aware that Zeus was working to give the Trojans victory. Great Ajax, son of Telamon, began and spoke his mind. "This is hopeless. Any fool can see Father Zeus himself is helping the Trojans. Every spear they throw hits its mark. Whether an incompetent or expert throws it, Zeus sees it to its target, while all ours fall ineffectually to the ground like this. Well, we shall have to come up with an effective tactic of our own for bringing the body away and pleasing our comrades behind by getting safely back to them. They must be watching us in some anxiety and wondering whether anything can stop man-slaying Hector in his determined onslaught from swooping down on our black ships. If only one of our men could run with a message to Achilles. I don't believe he has even heard the dreadful news of his dear companion's death. But I can't see the man for this task. Men and horses are all lost in this mist. Father Zeus, get us out of it and give us a clear sky so that at least we can see what we're doing. As long as we are in the light, kill us too, since that is what you want." So he spoke, and the father, moved by this tearful outburst, quickly cleared away the darkness and dispersed the mist. The sun burst through, bringing the whole battlefield into view. Then Ajax said to Menelaus, master of the battle cry, "Now look around you, Olympian-born Menelaus, and see whether you can spot great-hearted Nestor's son Antilochus. If he is still alive, tell him to run quickly to warlike Achilles with the news that his dearest companion is dead." So he spoke, and Menelaus, master of the battle cry, complied. He set off like a lion that retreats from a farmyard when it is tired of pitting itself against the dogs and men. They have stayed awake all night to protect the choicest of their cattle from its jaws, but, hungry for meat, the lion keeps on charging. But it does no good by it. Showers of spears and blazing torches hurled at it by strong hands scare it off for all its appetite. And at dawn it slinks off disappointed. So Menelaus, master of the battle cry, retired from the body of Patroclus. He did not wish to go at all, since he was much afraid that the Greeks, as the result of dire panic, might make the enemy a gift of it. He gave Meriones and the two Ajaxes full orders. "You two Ajaxes, leaders of the Greeks, and you Meriones, now is the time to remember poor, gentle Patroclus. To every one of us, he was the soul of kindness while he lived. Now death and destiny have claimed him." With these words, auburn-haired Menelaus went off, peering all around him like an eagle, which is said to have the sharpest sight of any bird in the sky. However high in the air, it still spots the swift hare crouching under a leafy bush and swoops down, seizes it, and takes its life. So Olympian-born Menelaus, did your brilliant eyes range everywhere among your many men to see whether Nestor's son Antilochus was still alive? Menelaus quickly spotted this man on the far left of the battle, encouraging his troops and driving them on to fight. Auburn-haired Menelaus went up to him and said, "Olympian-born Antilochus, come here and let me tell you the dreadful news. How I wish it had never happened. You must have seen for yourself that the god has already brought disaster to the Greeks and victory to the Trojans. But now the best of all the Greeks is dead, Patroclus. It is an enormous loss for us. Now run to the ships at once, let Achilles know and tell him to come to the rescue immediately and bring the body safely back to his ship. It has been stripped. Hector of the flashing helmet has his armour." So he spoke, and Antilochus was horrified at what he heard. For a while he was unable to speak, his eyes filled with tears, the words stuck in his throat. But he did not ignore Menelaus's orders and set off at a run after handing his armour to his admirable attendant Laodocus, who was manoeuvring his horses up and down beside him. He ran weeping from the battlefield to tell Achilles the bad news. Nor did you, Olympian-born Menelaus, wish to stay and help the weary Pylian troops whom Antilochus had left, though they missed their leader badly. Instead, Menelaus put godlike Thrasymedes in command and himself returned to stand over Patroclus. He ran up to the two Ajaxes and immediately said, "I've sent our man to the ships with a message for Achilles, but I dare not hope Achilles will come at once. However angry he may be with Hector, he can't fight the Trojans without his armour. We'll have to come up with an effective tactic of our own for bringing the body back and saving our own lives from these yelling Trojans." Great Ajax, son of Telamon, replied, "You're quite right, noble Menelaus. You and Meriones get your shoulders under the body, lift it up, and get it out of the fighting as fast as you can, while the pair of us stay and keep Hector and the Trojans engaged. We Ajaxes share the same name and spirit. This is not the first time we've fought in a tight corner side by side." So he spoke, and with a tremendous effort the two men hoisted Patroclus off the ground. The pursuing Trojans gave a shout when they saw the Greeks carrying off the body, and charged like hounds that launched themselves at a wounded boar in front of the young huntsman. For a while the hounds race after him, determined to tear him to pieces, but when the boar, relying on its strength, turns on them, they recoil and bolt in all directions. So for a time the Trojans followed up in a mass, stabbing with their swords and curved spears. But when the two Ajaxes turned and made a stand against them, their colour changed, and none of them had the courage to charge in and fight over the body. So, full of determination, Menelaus and Meriones carried Patroclus' body from the battlefield and brought it to the hollow ships. The battle extended round them as uncontrollable as a fire that suddenly blazes up and sweeps through a town, and the houses are consumed in a mighty conflagration, and a powerful wind roars on the flames. So the incessant din from the fighting men and chariots followed after them as they went. As mules put all their energy into dragging a log or some huge ship's timber down from the mountains by a rocky track, wearing themselves out with their exertions, heaving and sweating, so full of determination, they carried off the body. Behind them, the two Ajaxes held back the enemy, as a wooded ridge that lies in a continuous line across the countryside holds back the floods and withstands the destructive torrents of mighty rivers, diverting them all over the plain and thrusting them back. And the rivers do not break through, even when they pour down in spate. So all the time the two Ajaxes fended off the Trojans who attacked the rear. But the Trojans, and two men in particular, Aeneas, son of Anchises, and glorious Hector, kept after them. As a flock of starlings or jackdaws takes wing, screaming in confusion when they see a falcon after them, spelling death to their nestlings, so the Greek warriors, confused and yelling, fled before Aeneas and Hector, and lost the will to fight. Many a fine weapon fell at and around the ditch as the Greeks ran for it. But there was no let-up in the conflict.